Welcome to the Data Scientist Podcast with Dr. Stylianos Kampakis. Dr. Kampakis is a data scientist, statistician, and blockchain expert with a mission to educate the public about the wonderful capabilities of technologies like AI, data science, and DLTs. These technologies have the potential to transform the world, the economy, and our lives. However, there is too much misinformation around tech, and so most people are just confused about what is true and what is not. Whether you are a CEO, an entrepreneur, or just an enthusiast, the Data Scientist Podcast helps you separate reality from hype.
Hi everyone. On today's episode, I want to talk about AI ethics, but a bit more extensively than I did in the previous episode. So with the Tesseract Academy, we recently held an event with Raluca Crescent from Ethic on AI ethics. So this event, it was a very interesting discussion, very interesting Q&A, and we covered quite a lot of ground. And on this episode, I wanted to present you with an overview, with a summary of what was discussed and what are really the main takeaways. So one thing that I think if I had to choose like the main takeaway from this discussion is that AI ethics is here to stay and is going to become more and more important. So we went through a timeline of AI ethics, and AI ethics started becoming popular as, let's say, as a keyword, as a theme around 2021, 2022 or so. However, the advent of large language models, especially ChatGPT, has skyrocketed the popularity of AI ethics simply because there are so many different concerns around how AI is being used, how it's being trained, who owns the data, who owns the IP of whatever AI is generating, whether it's images, text, etc. And with AI invading pretty much every industry, but also many different parts of our lives, this has become a very important conversation. So the next step is to move from conversation to regulation, okay? And this is the other thing we discussed, that now regulations are being investigated and they're going to be taking effect over the next few years. For example, in the US, the AI regulation is still state-driven, but some kinds of regulations are already in effect. For example, in New York has the AI Recruitment Act, which essentially places certain guardrails as to how AI can be used in recruitment to avoid disasters, like one that happened with Amazon that created an algorithm that was biased against female candidates. The UK is obviously investigating regulation. If anything, the UK is trying to become a leader in this area. I guess that's also because of Brexit. So as you might be aware, the UK has been into turmoil in the last few years with Brexit, and it's trying to get a competitive advantage in technology. And I think there are some people in government who believe that having a first mover advantage in AI regulation, or at least being very forward thinking about AI regulation, is definitely going to help in that direction. So that's another thing. Then the EU is creating its own EU AI Act. So I believe that in the near future, what you're going to see is that AI ethics, AI regulation within the EU is going to become like the GDPR. So what this means is that GDPR, once it came into effect, every company had to undergo, some GDPR checks. And I believe that this also created a very big market, for GDPR consultants and services. So I think we will witness something similar with the EU AI Act. So in the next few years, we're going to witness artificial intelligence being more regulated. And this means that we're going to see, let's say, products and services showing up in this area. Then in China, there's a regulation around large language models. However, as you might be aware, China is not a democracy, so they have, many of the things that happen there, we don't really, we don't get a completely clear picture. And I guess it's the same with AI and regulation. So it's really difficult to comment upon what is really happening there and how like a Western company would approach Chinese regulation for that matter. But then Singapore is also looking into its own regulation. Singapore is very forward-looking, is a very tech-heavy region, so that's also an important player in this area. And also there are some standards that are being investigated by the ISO committee, by the IEEE, and there are also going to be some healthcare-specific standards around the use of AI. So that being said, while it might be difficult to predict what regulation will look like into each one of those regions, we might have to wait for a while for this to happen. Nevertheless, what we do know is that there are going to be certain guiding principles that all regulations are going to follow. So if you abide by those principles, then your life is going to be considerably easier in the next few years. So we do know that there's going to be a requirement for explainability. We do know there's going to be a requirement for fairness and inclusion. We do know there's going to be a requirement about data governance and privacy, and safety and security, robustness and traceability, and finally transparency, which kind of goes hand in hand with explainability to some extent. Something which is interesting in this area, and it's actually quite ironic in certain ways, is that advances in AI, like large language models, can place new strains and create new issues for some of those guiding principles. So, for example, LLMs are not really great in explainability. They quite often hallucinate facts, and being able to understand how they came up with some particular, let's say, piece of text with some idea might not be as easy. And really, this wasn't really a problem until ChatGPT came about. So these are some of the challenges that we're going to be facing in the next few years. But the good news is that on one hand, the technology to tackle some of those issues for more traditional models and algorithms are there, and it's definitely something we can help you with. I mean, we as the data scientist and Tesseract team, that's one thing. And secondly, if you want to look into these issues from a, let's say, higher level perspective, there are certain frameworks to help you with this. We do have a framework within the Tesseract Academy called the Lean AI Ethics Framework, which can help you prepare for this kind of regulation. So once this regulation gets into effect, then it will be very easy to adapt to the new situation, to this new landscape. So that being said, I think that the space of AI ethics is definitely something to keep within your radar. We're going to see lots of things happening in the near future. In the rest of the event, we went through a Q&A. We discussed some specific use cases, such as how to deal with bias and toxicity in large language models, as well as structured models. Right now, structured models, the models trained to structured data like supervised learning, these are the easiest models to deal with in terms of transparency or fixing bias. For LLMs, there are some solutions, but I guess they're non-trivial. So you definitely require some kind of human oversight. And it's probably something that extends beyond the scope of a podcast episode or even a presentation. But if you're interested in learning how you can tackle some of those issues like bias, toxicity, and inaccuracies in large language models, just shoot me an email and I'm more than happy to help you with that. Yeah, so that being said, I guess this concludes today's episode. Again, I wanted to keep it short and just provide you a very short summary of what was discussed. As always, if you're interested in knowing more about AI or machine learning, if you want to implement these types of technologies in your business, or if you're a senior professional who wants to become more competitive in this landscape, more than happy to help you out. Make sure to get in touch through the datascientist.com or through the Tesseract Academy's website. And we're also more than happy to help you with AI ethics. So make sure to visit the datascientist.com and Tesseract.academy, that is Tesseract with double S. And we hope to see you again soon in some other of our episodes. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to visit thedatascientist.com for more content about data science, AI, and blockchain.